Hey kindergarten. As always, you guys impress me so much with how much you want to learn and grow your brains. Now during this school year, you all loved to hear about that big ship called the Titanic. And I promised you all school year we would do a Titanic unit. So we're going to start today by reading a book called Titanic, the National Geographic for Kids by Melissa Stewart. And you can see an image of Titanic as it's sinking on the front cover. So right away we know that Titanic is a big ship that sinks. Let's find out more about Titanic. Here is our table of contents that tell us the things we're going to be looking and learning about. Here's a picture of the first page. It says Illustration of Titanic Shipwreck from 1985. Ever dreamed of exploring the ocean for a shipwreck? Imagine how exciting it would be to discover a hidden treasure. Think that kind of thing only happens in the movies? Think again. In 1985, Robert Ballard led a team that discovered a sunken ship called the RMS Titanic. Other people have found shipwrecks, but Titanic is special. It's one of the most famous ships of all time. The whole world was excited about Ballard's discovery. And here's a picture from when Robert Ballard, who's seen here, discovered the Titanic's bow, or the front of the ship. Robert Ballard and his crew celebrated on board their research ship, the Nore, after they first spotted wreckage from the Titanic in 1985. My team had been watching the ocean floor with an underwater camera for days, and all we'd seen was mud. Late one evening, our camera suddenly passed over a ship's boiler, and at that moment, we knew we'd found it. That was Robert Ballard talking about the moment they discovered the Titanic. You might have heard him say that they discovered a boiler first. That was part of the engines that made the ship move. The Wonder Ship. Zoom into those pictures. This was a first-class bedroom. This was the ship's gym. And this was the first-class cafe. You might hear terms like first class. Those are the people who had the most money on the ship and they bought the most expensive tickets. What made Titanic so special? In 1912, it was the biggest ship ever built. That's why some people call it the Wonder Ship. Other people called it a floating palace. Titanic had every possible luxury. Fine wood paneling, crystal and gold light fixtures, and a grand staircase with a skylight above it. That's made of glass and metal, and it was beautiful. First-class passengers ate fancy meals and enjoyed the ship's gym and swimming pool. Luxury is a word that was used in our sentence that they had every possible luxury on the Titanic. Luxury is something that offers pleasure or comfort, but isn't necessary, so you don't need it. It's often difficult or very expensive to get. The Titanic was very expensive to build. Titanic had 9 decks or levels with separate areas for first class, second class, and third class passengers. Here's a brief picture. And what the artist has done is shown us the inside of the Titanic by not drawing the edge. Now there's some very important Titanic words we need to know to understand the ship. The first is the bow. That's the front end of the ship. The second is the stern, the back end of a ship. And the hull is the lowest part of the ship. It's partly covered with water. Think of the hull almost like the backbone or spine of the ship. I'll zoom in again. Now Titanic had 4 funnels or smokestacks. The first 3 let out steam and smoke from their engines below. The 4th one was a dummy funnel. It didn't do anything. It was added to make Titanic seem even longer, so it was an eye trick. Over here on the first mast is the crow's nest. 2 men would sit up in this small little white bucket and they would look out for things that could cause a collision or a crash. My pretty little cabin with its electric heater and pink curtains delighted me. Its beautiful lace quilt and pink cushions and photographs all around. It all looked so homey. This is something that was said by passenger Lady Duff Gordon about her first class stateroom. Remember, first class had all the luxuries. Now this page has 10 cool things about Titanic. Number 1, Titanic was almost as long as 3 football fields. Number 2, including the 4 smokestacks, the ship was as tall as a 17-story building. You'd have to put 9 of our skulls on top of each other just to be as tall as the ship. 3, Titanic's engines used more than 800 tons of coal each day. The ship's top speed was 24 knots, or 27 miles an hour. So coal is something that you can find in the earth, and it provides heat, which turns the ship into energy to give it energy to move. The Titanic used coal instead of gasoline or oil like we would use now. Number 4, Titanic was one of the first ships to have a telephone system and electric lights in all of the rooms. Remember, it was a luxury ship. Number 5, the ship had 4 elevators, a heated swimming pool, a gym, 2 libraries, and 2 barber shops for passengers. Number 6, these are fun facts about the Titanic. Each day, the passengers and crew used 14,000 gallons of drinking water. Number 7, smoke and steam made by Titanic's boilers escaped through the 3 stacks. Builders added a 4th stack because they thought it made the ship look better. Number 8, here's a cool picture of the Titanic crew, the people who worked on the ship. Titanic could carry 3,547 passengers and crew. About 2,200 people traveled on its first voyage. You might hear the word maiden voyage, that's its first voyage. Number 9, some passengers paid about $99,000 in today's money to travel aboard the Titanic. So it was very expensive for some tickets. Some tickets were very cheap. Last, number 10. To feed the passengers and crew, Titanic had 86,000 pounds of meat, 40,000 eggs, 40 tons of potatoes, 7,000 heads of lettuce, 3,500 pounds of onions, 36,000 apples, and 1,000 loaves of bread on board to feed the passengers, the people riding on the ship, and the crew, the people who worked on the ship. Now we're going to learn about building Titanic. So many ships are not built in the water, they're actually built on land called dry dock, and there's no water, and then they move them slowly into the water. Titanic was built in Ireland in 1910. Titanic's tragic story began in 1907. That's when J. Bruce Ismay, this man right here, of the British shipping company, the White Star Line, and William J. Peary of Harland and Wolff, that's this man, decided to build 3 huge ships. One of those ships was Titanic. In 1909, Thomas Andrews began work on Titanic in Belfast, Ireland. The ship was finished on March 31st, 1912. In early April of that year, Titanic arrived in Southampton, England. Then, a 900-person crew took a week to prepare for the ship's first voyage. Bon voyage. When Titanic left England on April 10th, 1912, it had an impressive list of passengers. So here it is at the dock, and it's getting ready to leave the dock to set sail. So passengers and all their belongings would go through checkpoints, and they would get on their ship to board. White Star Line's chairman, J. Bruce Ismay, and Titanic builder Thomas Andrews were on board. So were some of the richest people in the world. Here's Colonel John Jacob Astor IV, and he was a real estate millionaire from New York. Here is Benjamin Guggenheim, who made his fortune in the mining business. And lastly, Isidor Straus, owner of Macy's department stores. We still have Macy's stores today. He was one of the owners and operated Macy's. He was on the Titanic as well. The ship also carried many middle-class passengers and poor immigrants who hoped for a better life in America. Here's one of our Titanic terms: An immigrant is a person who leaves one country to settle or live in another. For the first few days of the trip, passengers felt like they were on vacation, almost like a cruise ship. They spent their time strolling around the deck, playing cards, and enjoying the ship's fine food and other luxuries. Here we can see them on the deck. But all that changed on Sunday, April 14th, 1912. That's when Titanic entered an area of the northern Atlantic known as Iceberg Alley. An iceberg is a large mass of ice floating in the sea. The tricky thing about icebergs is that you only see the very top part of it. Most of an iceberg is actually under the water where you can't see it. It makes it hard for sailors to know just how big the icebergs are. As Titanic cruised across the wavy water at top speed, it received 9 iceberg warnings from other ships. But wireless operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride were busy sending and receiving messages from passengers. They didn't deliver all the warnings to the bridge. So here they are in their telegraph room. And a bridge is another term that we heard, and it's a ship's control center. Titanic was steered and navigated from the bridge. Here's the captain on the bridge. You might have also heard the term wireless, an early form of radio that relayed messages through a coded series of beeps. This is one that would be similar to the one on Titanic. It's not the same one because that one sank. Captain Edward J. Smith seemed to ignore the messages he did receive during the day. Before dinner, he finally changed the ship's course or direction to the south, but he didn't slow it down. Remember, it was going really fast. And Captain Smith had a very long and successful career at sea. Commanding Titanic was supposed to be his very last assignment, so it was his last job before he was retiring. But he went down with the ship, as captains often do. After sunset, stars shone brightly in the moonless sky. There was actually no moon. Now, if you look outside on a bright moon night, you can see that the moon gives us some light. It bounces from the sun to the moon, and it reflects back on Earth. And that gives us a little bit of light to see around us. But on the night the Titanic sank, there was no moon to give us that extra light. The air was bitterly cold, and the water was glassy smooth. There was no waves that night. It was a very smooth, calm sea. Just before midnight, Frederick Fleet, one of the ship's lookouts, spotted a large dark object in the water. Unfortunately, many people believe that Titanic was unsinkable, but the builders never actually made that claim. Frederick Fleet rang the alarm bell 3 times and shouted, "Iceberg right ahead!" First Officer William Murdoch reacted quickly. He ordered the crew to reverse the engines and turn the boat left, away from the iceberg. Then he pulled a switch to close the bulkheads, but it was too late. We heard the Titanic term bulkhead here. A bulkhead is a wall meant to slow or prevent flooding by separating Titanic's hull into 16 different compartments. So we're actually going to stop that video there, and we'll find out what happens to the Titanic in our next video about that. I hope you're enjoying learning all about the Titanic, boys and girls, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.